This AR-15 that I have on my lap, this is in fact a weapon of war. The suppressor that I'm holding in my hand here is a tool for fighting discreetly. The helmet, my Team Wendy bump over here with the PD Pro binocular night vision, this is for fighting in the darkness. My battle belt is to hold a fighting pistol and other gear to my body. Same thing with chest rigs, plate carriers, and all of the other tools that are protected under the Second Amendment. The media is correct. These are weapons and tools of war. And we've gone on long enough dancing around the Second Amendment and what the natural right to own fighting gear is all about. And you hear this term thrown around by the media often. We don't need weapons of war on our streets. They cry this from the rooftops as if it's supposed to mean something to any of us. What this points to is a complete misunderstanding of what the natural right to self-preservation is all about. And I would counter first with this. The elitists know what I'm talking about. Some are, in fact, ignorant and misinformed, but most desire power so desperately that they must ensure that we cannot resist them. I often think about how ugly 2020 could have been if we didn't have rifles in every corner of this nation. How far would the radical terrorists of COVID have gone? People like me would have been in camps, no doubt. I saw footage from other nations of women and children being dragged from homes violently to be given medicine and kept in camps, for their safety. You want to flip a switch and see retribution? Try that here. Drag a woman or a child from a man who is armed in this nation from their home. As Americans, we have fighting blood running through our veins, a nation founded by what redcoats and Tories would have called domestic terrorists. Some nations have a history and bloodline in martial arts. Our martial art is gunfighting. One of the first things that we need to understand as citizens is what the 2A is and what it does and doesn't do. Many people believe that our Constitution and the amendments within the Bill of Rights grants us the freedoms that we hold. This thinking is troublesome as it rests the powers to have rights on a document rather than accepting them as natural rights protected by this document. Let me explain. If the Constitution grants rights, then our rights are not natural and they also are not secure. They can simply be voted away into dust. The reality is the Constitution and the amendments within, like the Second Amendment, are limitations on government bodies, not limitations on citizens. Our founders would have had to be pretty retarded to think that the government should be in the business of regulating arms. Remember, our constitutional republic was structured from a fear of an abusive government. Our founders openly declared that governments are corrupted and abusive in nature. Why in the heck would they recognize that historically all governments have turned tyrannical, then in the same exact breath ask for that very tyrannical government to regulate the tool needed to fight the tyrannical government? Simple answer, they didn't. Our broken culture has interpreted this entire topic incorrectly. Rights, like our right to keep and bear arms, are viewed as natural rights that predate any human structure of government. In other words, if the government we have disappears today, you still have the right to defend yourself against individual and collective attackers and oppressors with firearms. This is up to and including your own government. These natural rights are protected at the federal level because they ought to be consistent across all the states in this nation. Once a right is protected within the federal Constitution, it should be enjoyed and secured for all in every square inch of this nation. Now, we know that this isn't always the case, and often states will even further infringe on rights, even when they are federally protected. The elitists in power desperately want you to believe that they grant the rights to you. The longer we believe that rights are granted rather than natural, the longer our republic will be on life support. Look, guys, we just celebrated Independence Day. What does that day actually celebrate? And I think Firearm Policy Coalition summarized it really well in their recent Instagram post. Independence Day celebrates tax evasion, disobedience of government orders, riots, vandalism, illegal gun ownership, and acts of treason against the state. How ironic that a nation founded by radicals now views anyone of like mind to our forefathers as terrorists. Historically, when it comes to our firearms, we have danced around the subject, backpedaled, and also named our guns stupid things like modern sporting rifles. And generally, we've focused on hunting and self-defense. And the question is, why? Why would we bastardize the Second Amendment and what the Second Amendment represents? It's actually pretty simple. It's no different than the political correctness culture that has run rampant in our nation. Gun owners fell into usually one of a few different categories. We have the collectors. They didn't really want to be controversial at all. They just like guns. These people, ironically, often own historic weapons of war, but don't want you owning them because their investments will lose value if we deregulate them. These folks will not admit what the 2A is about and are often in support of unethical, unconstitutional gun control measures so long as they can continue to pay to play. Heck, many of these people own automatic weapons and other forms of weaponry that are virtually unobtainable to regular citizens like you and I. The second is hunters. These folks believe that guns are for putting food on the table, and a secondary use for guns would be self-preservation. They're often not really on board with weapons of warcraft in citizens' hands. These people say things like, well, at least my bolt-action rifle is safe, every time gun control is shoved down our throats. Number 3 would be the concealed carriers, and typically these folks are mostly focused on compact or everyday carry pistols. They're more likely to carry for self-defense situations. Now, people that daily carry pistols tend to be more in alignment with citizens owning weapons of war, but that's not always the case. Just take a look at our bag videos. How many people in the comments section are saying, oh, I carry a pistol every single day. There's no reason ever to carry a rifle. Now, obviously, not everyone who conceal carries a pistol is against the true meaning of our natural right to own weapons, but you get where I'm going. Just because they do believe in self-defense does not mean they understand the 2A. The last group that I just wanted to touch on is what I would call the based 2A understanders. These people believe that the Second Amendment limits the government and that the government has no business in regulating the arms of the populace, and also that weapons of war should be in the hands of regular citizens with no LEO or military background whatsoever. Now, talking about hunting culture has largely hurt our rights to carry arms. And this is why you see things like the word sport added to AR-15s like the M&P 15 Sport. Hunters have made gun rights about sport. Now, unless you're hunting tyrants for sport, the 2A isn't about sporting purposes. Let me give you a great example, and bear with me as I try to explain this. In my state of Pennsylvania, it is illegal to carry long guns loaded in your vehicle. The basic premise of why this was passed and the reasoning behind it goes all the way back to the Pennsylvania Game Commission attempting to fight poaching. Hunters, understandably upset about poaching, beg the government to act, and when the government does, they decide in all their wisdom that carrying a long gun in your vehicle is now illegal, which infringes on your right to self-defense and your Second Amendment rights in general. So effectively, since that has occurred, it has been illegal to carry a rifle with a barrel longer than 16 inches or a shotgun with a barrel longer than 18 inches loaded inside of your vehicle for defensive purposes. Keep in mind, there's tens of thousands of laws just like this that originated from someone else trying to control another person. In the case of poaching, poaching is illegal. Prosecute the people found poaching. Don't make stupid laws that end up making it impossible for citizens to practice their rights without risking government abuse against that citizen. Another negative effect of hunting culture is it has bred an entire generation of people, including myself, to handle guns in dumb ways. Think about all the hunter safety courses. You'll just unload your rifle before you cross the creek. Unload before you climb a tree stand. Don't ever cross a fence. Don't ever jump or run with a gun. All of these arbitrary rules were created, and it got to the point where some ranges will absolutely not even allow you to move with a rifle, as if defense of life and liberty happens standing still at 10 yards. Look, that might have been how the British fought in the Revolution, but it's stupid. There's a time and place for safety and building good foundations, and I wholeheartedly agree with that. I'm not advocating to be unsafe with firearms, but we must be careful as to how we allow a broken culture to impact the rights that we do hold. You should be capable of running safely with your rifle. You should know how to navigate obstacles with your gear and kit. You should know how to drive your vehicle with your rifle on you. Instead of focusing on what the right to keep and bear arms is all about, we've neutered it into this unrecognizable thing that is far off the course from what it was originally meant to be. Every time the elitists move their chess piece one step closer to stealing our rights, we dance around rather than pushing back. For fear of being labeled a domestic terrorist, we are too scared to speak up. And I've got a news flash for you. You're already labeled that in our nation's current culture. You click this video, you're watching it, you are already marked as a radical. so be it. If loving this nation, the foundational principles of the republic, and loving our neighbors and being willing to sacrifice for them makes us a radical, then so be it. I'll take the label. Consider the Supreme Court decision that was recently announced. Citizens have the right to firearms not only on their property and homes, but also in the public. How crazy is it that we need the Supreme Court to decide that, oh yeah, by the way, you do in fact have a right to carry guns around in public, and the government's not allowed to make you prove a reason for carrying them? Now, I believe that the decision is a win in general, but also points to the state of our culture and how much work is yet to be done. Now, before someone jumps in and comments and ridicules us because gun rights have been expanded over the last several decades, I agree. There have been many major wins, but there have also been major losses. I get really frustrated when someone simply brings up some old infringement on rights that happened way back in the day and then says, oh yeah, it could be worse. Keep in mind, we are better than we were. Yes, it could be worse. Yes, we have had wins, but that's not the point. The point is our rights are still not fully restored to the condition that they ought to be in. Just because gun control happened early in the history of the Republic doesn't make the gun control we see now any less heinous. We still have magazine restrictions in many states. We still have to fill out papers to buy guns. We still get fingerprinted for every single suppressor. Heck, the term SBR and SBS still exist. And red flag laws exist in various locations in our nation. So the question is, what do we do about the culture and the conversation? I think owning the words is a major strategic move. Anti-gun organizations and anti-gun people love using words that make us cower. Assault weapon, extended magazines, weapons of war. These words evoke emotion in idiots. And we fuel the fire when we backpedal. How many times have you seen someone on a conservative news channel debating a progressive, and when the anti-gunner says, you don't need weapons of war, the host will say, the AR-15 is not a weapon of war. It is a weapon of war. It's a tool for fighting. That is literally what it is. And as free citizens of this nation, we own firearms to protect our life, property, and our liberty. And yes, that means we own weapons of war to be able to resist tyranny and oppression. A side benefit of fully embracing this position is the fact that when our rights are intact, the risk of violence, government overreach, and civil war is extremely low. Rifles are a safety barrier against oppression by the state and its agencies. We've danced around the topic long enough. It's time that we take the conversation back, stop dancing around political correctness, and regain our rights and restore them to their original intent, which is regular citizens with no LEO or military background, owning the warfighting equipment to ensure freedom and liberty for our people. This is the true balance of power. When someone tells me that I own weapons of war, I oblige. Why, yes, I do. I own many weapons of war, and I intend to keep them at all costs because, you know what? I value individual liberty, and I believe that when this nation and its culture is revived, we will see a new era of prosperity. Starts with you and I owning the conversation and never backing down from our positions. Regardless of what the NRA says or what they do, the Second Amendment puts a limit on the federal government. It limits the government's ability to regulate weapons and tools of war. The right to bear arms is not only about self-preservation against individual attacks, but it is also a barrier against the government. The last 2 years have showed us that our government is complicit in the murder of hundreds of thousands. We are pawns on a chessboard. We are disposable to those who claim to represent us. The only way that you remain free is by having the means to remain free. Leaders will not just grant you liberty. Liberty is most often earned through blood, turmoil, and massive sacrifice. Thankfully, our founders did this for us over 200 years ago. We just need to decide to own our rights and restore our culture. And that is the work that we need to do, and it has to start today. Taking back the words and not shying away from what our rights mean, it's a great place to start.